insights from our interviews with Chinese consumers with metabolic health conditions. So I'll be covering the personal issues they face, what they're currently doing in terms of their diets, lifestyle changes and medications. And then I want to turn to their views on new types of functional foods with added health benefits. Where might these fit into the picture? So just before I start, a very quick overview of our methods. So our team spent 10 days in Shanghai, and I was very privileged to be directly involved in that interviewing process. So we began with quite an intensive weekend of focus groups, and these involved mixed gender groups of 2 age groups. And we sat in the observation room watching behind the mirror and listening to a simultaneous translation of the group conducted in Mandarin by a trained moderator. And we were able to relay questions if needed. So it was great because this gave us insights from a group perspective, but helped us inform the interviews which were to follow. So the participants sat on the table there in the other room, and we got really good discussions happening. For the second phase, we then spent 6 days undertaking face-to-face interviews, travelling across many parts of the city. And we were very fortunate to be able to conduct the interviews in the participants' homes. And we could make observations of their homes, their kitchens, the types of foods they stored, how they cooked, etc. One important thing to point out is that they came from mid to high socioeconomic groups, but within this we did see sort of quite a range from those living in fairly small and modest apartments to those at the very top end. Just to illustrate this is just a very small traditional kitchen just off the hallway from one extreme, and then to the other was perhaps more what we'd see in the Western style and more largely well-appointed types of kitchen. So they were the 2 extremes that we saw. Okay, so the participants we interviewed had all been screened for having a metabolic health condition themselves, or they lived with a family member who had a condition. So they had very close experiences. So as you may well know, China's push for economic development since 1978 has seen major increases in their GDP, but the downside of this has been dramatic lifestyle changes causing deteriorating health for many citizens, which includes metabolic diseases. So as you also may know, Chinese people's health is monitored with their annual medical examination. This is undertaken by employers for the government. So, and within this, they get measures of what they term the triple highs, which are high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or high blood sugar. And these have become central concerns, especially for those that we interviewed. So in contrast to the problematic gut issues that Ivy was discussing on Tuesday, these participants have been diagnosed with an actual condition, and for many of them it's at the forefront of their lives. It's stressful, they worry about not recovering, and they're wanting to improve if they can, or simply stop it from getting worse. Now, it was really interesting because we interviewed some younger adults who actually said that they were in worse health than their parents. So their parents perhaps got some of these conditions when they were in their 50s or 60s, whereas with these ones, and I've got some illustrations there. We see the woman on the left is only 30 and she's on medication for high blood sugar. The man in the middle, he's 28 and has high blood pressure. Not on medication, but being told to lose weight by his doctor. And on the right, a lady aged 33 and having concerns with her high cholesterol reading. So I think we can see very different segments of consumers with existing conditions and looking to prevent them from worsening. I think one of the first main insights is the way participants talked about their metabolic health when we asked them about this overall term. And they certainly understand that there's an underlying system and they need to have that underlying system working right across. but they related it more to their endocrine system or their circulation or their gastro system. But they certainly had this idea that something internally, it was to do with the speed of what was working. But for them, they most strongly focused on what they had to deal with. So if they had a particular, one of the conditions, whether it was high blood sugars or high blood pressure. And so they, across our interviews, some had just one condition, or some had two, and a few had three of the triple highs. And this really, the symptoms that they had were that they felt sleepy, they felt tired, they were worried if something would happen to them if they did strenuous exercise. So they talked about their physical suffering and also their fears of what was to come, and perhaps in terms of the onset of more serious types of diseases. Secondly, it seemed that there seemed to be a sense of inevitability, really, almost a powerlessness about the types of factors that were leading to the incidence of these health conditions. So such as working long hours, feeling stress about work, poor food quality, pollution, etc. So, and combined with this, though, even though that they knew sometimes foods were unhealthy for them, they still wanted to have this ability to access tasty and convenient foods. Even though that they knew that food was thought to contribute directly to their condition. There was also a reliance on smoking and alcohol. Many spoke about that. So I think they also did see, yes, some of them said it was their constitutions that perhaps had led to this sort of deterioration of health, but it was more about their lifestyles. Many of them saw it as more of a direct result of their diet and their lifestyle. So they're certainly motivated, and we got the impression that they did want to seek solutions, but they were finding it a sort of a difficult endeavour, and they would certainly look towards a magic bullet perhaps to help them. I've got a couple of quotes here just to illustrate the types of conflicts of living with these conditions in terms of, I think, really examples of the intention to behaviour gap. And for example, I have a lot of business entertainment, which means I must drink a lot. You treat your clients with good food and good alcohol. So it's about trying to find, I guess, external control, but also, and the one on the right at the bottom, I cannot avoid desserts. My face lights up when talking about sweets, but you feel guilty all the same. So that we've got sort of issues with self-control, and these are from people who have you know, are on the one on the right, they're on medication for all the three highs. So certain conflicts there. In our observation, it was actually fascinating to see displays in the living rooms of different valued positions, and not surprisingly, I guess they seem to put alcohol right at the centre there, with bottles of, you know, whiskey, champagne, gin displayed as with sort of a reverence, I guess, for these symbols, perhaps a sign of wealth and success. So they're right there, front and centre in their living rooms. It was also interesting to hear participants relate their usual ways of eating, and I'll just go through these very quickly in terms of, because obviously we were only dealing with a fairly small sample, but there were certain patterns that came through, the desire to eat 3 good meals a day, and they seem to start off quite healthily in the morning with a selection of cereals, oatmeal, steamed buns, and they see it important to get your nutrition early in the morning. But then when often they have long commutes, working hours tend to be long, and then from lunchtime on there was this need to perhaps get more energy, and eating away from home meant that the choices were often cooked meats, rice, vegetables, and to sort of keep energy going, whereas dinner could be simpler, rice, soup, vegetables, or else dining out with work as well. So as you would expect, we saw really an enormous range of foods, But also the incidence of snacking was mentioned, including those midnight snacks. So I think across we could see the high consumption of meat, high eating out, and that sort of pattern, that was their sort of daily average, their practices on a daily basis. But here's just another example here of a male aged 35 with blood pressure. He said that every weekend we have a habit for the whole day. We go to a restaurant and have a whole day meal. So for lunch, we will go to some Western restaurant for steak, and for dinner, we're more likely to go to a premium restaurant. So that's every weekend. So that's obviously involving quite a lot of, rich food, which is not perhaps ideal for these types of conditions. So I want to move on now to talking about what the participants told us about what they do as they attempt to deal with their health conditions. So they actively seek advice from their doctor, pharmacists, at hospitals, and for many of them they go to the community health centre, which is normally free. Those who with the more serious conditions purchased devices, and so that they could monitor their conditions at home. Because once they knew that they had these types of conditions, that they were, I think they tended in the first instance very closely follow their advice of their professional. For those who were clinically diagnosed, they tended to be recommended by their doctor to have either Western medicines or a sort of a combination of Western medicines and TCM. But for those on the Western medicine, they clearly told us that they didn't like being on it. They didn't really want to be on it. It was seen as toxic or poison, and it would treat the symptoms, yes, but not necessarily the underlying cause. So whereas for traditional Chinese medicine, it was seen as a much more natural approach, and they would because it's extracted from natural resources, but it does take it's a longer term type of process, and they also didn't favour the bad smell, the taste. So across the different participants, we saw those who were older, more likely to want to take the medication, overdoing lifestyle changes, whereas the younger participants tended to be less willing to become reliant on some sort of medication, and they were keener to make the diet and lifestyle changes. So overall, it appeared that participants use a sort of personal mix or a personal assemblage of different traditional and modern treatments. So I mentioned the medications, the Western type of pills and capsules, and supplementing with the TCM, but they do also try to make dietary improvements as a first step as well. And I've got my next slide will show you some of the details on that one. They're also keen to make these different lifestyle changes, and good intentions about exercise, but that this may have to happen inside due to pollution levels. Trying to get more sleep, trying to not smoke and alcohol and drink if possible, and trying to stay positive as well. But we also saw this, incredibly quite high usage of dietary supplements. And there were many different types across the homes that we saw, combinations of fish oil, calcium, different vitamins, etc. there. And they were seen as being able to help improve various body functions. But if we just turn back to those dietary improvements, so there was a range of things that were mentioned, such as avoiding pork. Beef was seen, I guess, as a leaner meat and with better protein and better fibre. So they wanted to cut back on meat, and they also wanted to buy fresh vegetables and actually target organic or buying organic ingredients and also target particular types of fruit and vegetables for their particular conditions. So, for example, celery was seen as important for helping lower blood pressure, and they talked about wanting sour tasting fruits, which made sense with those who were looking for less sweet types of foods, and also bitter melon was mentioned. So they want to move away from the refined white rice and healthier ways of cooking. But I thought, interestingly, they stated that they wanted to buy more expensive foods, as they really related to the price of foods. If it's higher, it's going to be better quality. And if possible, they want to buy their fruit and vegetables online rather than from the wet markets. These are just a couple of examples of different types of dietary supplementation from TCM type products and enzymes. I also found it really interesting to contrast different fridge compilations. And I noted that for older consumers and those in the perhaps more modest apartments, there was a lot of storage of foods. They had meats, they had vegetables, sauces. The fridge was really well stocked up, lots of frozen meats hiding away there in the freezers. But in contrast, for those from the younger participants and those on higher incomes, there was clearly a lot more eating out that was taking place, and quite a different range of ingredients and foodstuffs in their fridge. So, for example, the one on the left, this woman would drink Perrier water and just instead of water. That was her drink of the day, and Pellegrino, I think she had in there as well. She had some Toblerone chocolate, the Yakult yogurts, but she claimed to be following much more of a Western lifestyle. So she had moved right away from the cooking of the rice, the vegetables, and excuse me. And on the right as well, this was a younger male aged 28 who clearly just had a few sort of basic items there, and most of the time, I guess, would have been eating out. So interesting contrast there. And then I saw what I called the dietary supplement fridge, which was where this particular participant, who was 34 years old and on medication for both high blood pressure and high cholesterol, actually had a fridge for supplements. So he saw them as really part of his food intake as being essential to his health. So for him, he was taking a really holistic approach because he took a huge range of different supplements. So I know whilst he was very much in favour of the supplements, there were other participants who, whilst they still took the supplements, they felt there might be safety issues depending on where they came from. So if you were a purchaser of supplements, you wanted to ideally get them from international channels, overseas channels, from a trusted brand, and you wanted to see that scientific evidence and certification. Okay, so I want to now turn specifically to the views of participants on potentially new types of foods that we introduced as a concept. So away from medications, but into foods, or we talked about the concept of fortified foods, foods with added health benefits to target these conditions. So whilst we saw that people did have some idea of the awareness that there was, say, yogurt to benefit the gastrointestinal system, they originally were thinking more in terms of supplements, but we discussed them as being more like a food, foods with added health benefits. So they became very interested, but it was seen as natural. But they certainly wanted to see evidence and assurances as well. So detailed scientific evidence, how does it work, that type of information, because it was something quite new to them. As in most food research, I think across the globe, taste is one of the most important factors. And they wanted to see products that would taste refreshing, not be too sweet, and have some sort of aromatic flavours as well. And I think there were concerns about could these types of food actually, the way they're made, include additives? Might there be side effects? They certainly were not keen on any preservatives at all. They were worried perhaps that by adding some sort of food benefit, some sort of health benefit into a food, would it change the taste and the effectiveness of the actual natural food product itself? But it was interesting to see that for a couple of people, the concept was actually seen as quite vague. This man, aged 35, he felt, I feel there would not be a food that is going to solve all of the 3 high issues. Maybe it can help one high, not all 3 problems at one time. So trying to solve many health issues with one product was certainly not seen as credible by some. And so I think they doubted that a combined approach across all of your systems would necessarily be effective. Certainly very important, they felt they would want to pay a price premium, because products like this would need R&D, and some sort of development and good quality ingredients. So if something was going to be cheaper, they would doubt the efficacy or the quality of the ingredients. So if the price is high, it's purely natural. If it's cheaper, it's more synthetic. So a very kind of straightforward heuristic used there. One other insight, and this was actually without exception across all the participants, was that New Zealand was seen as incredibly positive. They felt we had access to really safe, effective foods, that the environment was clean. And I mean, these are statements from consumers who really totally lack trust in their own food systems. So they wanted to feel, they felt New Zealand was very trustworthy and clean and green. And it fit in the types of foods that we had been discussing, such as dairy, honey, fruits, really was compatible and appropriate with the types of foods we were talking about. So New Zealand, really got a very strong positive feedback from that one. But obviously, we did these interviews before all the recent events that has been happening. So I think probably it would be fair to say that New Zealand's plus is going up as we speak. So just for the final section, and to kind of bring it all together for you, just some implications. I think it's where these types of foods fit in with the sort of hierarchy, I guess, of foods, medications, supplements, because consumers are certainly searching for an easy and convenient solution, something that they have faith in. The continued intake, I think, of expensive dietary supplements does show this opportunity, because they may not, when taking these types of products, actually feel the direct benefit, but they certainly don't want to stop taking them just in case it is working for them. So there's a lot of further consumer research needed to be done on the different segments and types of foods that sort of can match into this whole area of self-medication and prescribed medication. We talked about as Ivy did and talked about on Tuesday, there's a really wide variety of types of foods that might be suitable to fill this need. So they talked about foods. It would be really good if it was the types of foods that they would normally eat, because then they can just directly substitute it in, say for a rice, grain, oatmeals, etc. So that was all about convenience, I guess, and but feeling that it was perhaps that you would remember to take the food and eating the food rather than perhaps forgetting if you were taking a supplement. So there were suggestions, a lot of different suggestions, but the main ones they felt it would be good to see honey, dairy type products, even teas, coffees. And interestingly, they talked about vegetables and fruits as being, these are the types that they associate with their particular conditions. Celery, cucumbers, etc. So I think there is just value in talking also about this idea that different foods for each different triple high, I think is a sort of important thing to consider, because I think as consumers' knowledge of overall metabolic processes perhaps appears to be perhaps a little bit lower, but they certainly know a lot about the specific high that they have. So I think by identifying these different groups and linking them with a known ingredient, and being able to show product benefits clearly, that sort of came out from the interviews, that this could be valuable. And just finally, the need for campaigns that give information and come from credible sources. Of course, these are the ones that are giving more value, because consumers, they want to be recognised as being knowledgeable, and they want to see clear messaging and definite links between the types of ingredients and the beneficial effects, what's causing, what they want to see, this kind of linkage. So the more information addressed in it, and I guess there are many options for different promotional vehicles, but the key, I guess, is that idea of wanting some sort of evidence, and that it makes sense to them about how it's actually going to help them with their particular condition. Okay, thank you. So I'll hand back over now to Tracy.
Great. Thanks, Jenny. And what I'm going to do now is welcome Ivy Gann and Denise Conroy onto the screen, and I will, there they all are, lining up, ready and eager for your questions. So what we're going to do now is I've got a few questions that have come through on the chat line during Jenny's presentation, so I'll call those out first and allow Jenny to talk to those. If you come up with anything else in the interim, please feel free to post it on the chat whilst we're talking, or I will open the mic once Jenny's finished answering these few questions. I'd just also like to remind you that we have got Joan Todd online as well, so if you do have any of those more general HVN pointed questions, then you can post them up and I'll call them out to her. Okay, I will go to the panel and pose a few of these questions that I've got here. Right, we talked about, there was a good quote, avoid pork, beef is better, and there was a little bit of something there about fibre. The question was around, are there any particular foods in their diet that they associate more with being bad for their metabolic health?
I think the first one that comes to mind is pork. That you know, it's obviously high calorie. It's going to you know, has a lot of saturated fat, and but it's one for them, I think, that they eat quite a lot of. So I guess it's there's pork. There's the sweet type. I guess other foods. Would you have a comment on that, Ivy? Yeah. In terms of foods that are worse for them?
Yeah, definitely. Some fruits with high sugar content will be actively avoided. So they will seek for some sort of, as you said on your slides, sour tastes, and that would be more appropriate for especially those with diabetes.
And I think it's also the you know, the amount of food that's eaten as well, like the eating out, the salt, the sugars, the MSG, the spicy types of foods, all things that they seem to, you know, have had this ability to enjoy eating in increasingly larger amounts, I guess. So I think it's a combination probably of those sort of types of foods, which we would probably term as less healthy.
I agree, and I think that one of the good things about doing the research the way that we did it was that we could ask these questions, and really people understood what they shouldn't be eating. But when we opened their freezers, it would be stacked with pork, and so clearly the mouth wants what the mouth wants, which is probably the world over, not just in China.
Sorry, okay, I'm just trying to read a few of these comments here. We've got one here. How receptive would they be for fruits and vegetables that they do not normally consume, in that they're not local to Chinese consumers? So they're a bit novel. How would they be in terms of accepting any idea or leads on how they might accept these combined with foods or flavours that they are more familiar with? So new sorts of fruits and vegetables, whether they might appeal in the market.
I guess Chinese, especially the young generations, are quite keen on trying different things. And most of them are identified as foodies, so they are quite willing and quite open to normal food. And yeah, I can recall some scenes of lots of consumers lining up outside of a newly opened high-profile restaurants, or even for bubble tea, and they are just quite willing to try and be very happy to share that on their WeChat moments, and saying that, okay, I've tried this one, and they leave their comments and share all these things with their friends, and their friends can also follow their steps to try things, and then they have sort of food communication between each other.
Yeah.
So I guess they won't have much problem accepting new foods.
Yeah, I think, and also if they're moving, if some of them moving, wanting to try, much more Western style diets as well. So the younger ones, I think, if they would embrace it if it was something new and had some sort of benefits that they could relate to as well. So I would think it would be positive.
I don't think the term fussy eater applies in China. I think that they really embrace all kinds of different foods. But I think, to Jenny's point, some clear indication of if this is a functional food, what is its function, what is its benefit, is what that people are also looking for when they're actually trying to target a health issue.
Thank you. Just thinking a little bit more about this openness to trying new things, were there any did you see any differences due to age in accepting new products that are out there?
I think, as Ivy said, younger people are much more open. They've been brought up in a time when there has been abundance in terms of food from all over the world coming to China. So they're really embracing and that. Having said that, many of the younger people are the purchasers of food for the older people. So the target market is often the younger people, even though the actual consumer is going to be the older person. And then they have the persuasion of actually enticing them to try.
Yeah, so the younger people are influencing the older and what they want. So, yeah.
Great. We had a quote that said some of these people don't believe that there's a single product that can help them with all of their triple highs issues. Are you able to expand on this a bit?
Well, I think it was just that, I guess, say, if you have high blood pressure, you perhaps see a different type of solution going to be appropriate for you than, say, if say, somebody else has high cholesterol, and that maybe there is a different underlying cause for it. And so what types of products are going to be more effective are going to be different. So if you're coming in and saying these some products are going to be good for your sort of underlying system and your health, yes, but if you are really wanting to target your particular product, you also are going to be wanting something that's much more directed towards it.
Yeah, I think that it can be a bit misleading when we call or we don't say, we got it from the consumers, triple high,
Yeah.
because that sounds like a singular entity. But they clearly differentiate and understand that these are three separate medical conditions, and you may have one, you may have two, you may have three, you may have none.
Mhm.
So us saying triple high doesn't mean it's perceived as a singular.
And so you got medications from the doctor. You would get a different one if you were having one of those conditions. Would be totally different.
Yeah, the triple high, this term is just like an abbreviation for these three symptoms, both start with the word high together, and they do have some sort of similarity in terms of the causes.
Mm-hmm.
Just many people call it illness for afference. That means you adopt a certain type of lifestyle, and which means you need to be wealthy, so you can have lots of meat, and you don't need to go out to work really hard to earn your food. And that's the reason, that's the common reason for developing this, we call metabolic issues, or for Chinese, many call them the illness for the afference, and typically with the triple highs, but they do have, for different highs, they act on different organs. Yes. So the solution may, if you are targeting the symptom of each high, then the solution may need to be more specific, unless you are trying to, just as Jenny said, that trying to targeting the underlying the causes rather than the specific symptoms.
Great, thank you. I've got a really interesting one here. It's not specific to metabolic health, but it's getting at people who post images of themselves on social media, sort of eating healthfully. Do you think it's more important to be seen on social media to be eating healthily than what it is to actually be doing so?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's like your desired self. That is the desired self, the one that is going on to social media. I think possibly yes, but if that sort of behaviour does lead you to actually do that, possibly it is a good thing. But I don't know if people would post. Here's my fork, my massive
From my
fork and my
experience, yes, I think they do. Okay, because I guess from the motivation itself may not necessarily. I guess it's more like I just want to share my life with my friends, and I'm quite happy having this big lunch or dinner, and I'd like to share it with my friends. Or for myself, I usually post really healthy looking food, and that's part of my life. And actually another motivation is that I am trying to promote that sort of eating habits as well. So that really, I guess each person has his own motivation for that sharing. But and that kind of sharing sometimes really will have impact on your friends, your social networks as well.
And certainly share they do, and Ivy taught me the term fun eats first.
Yes.
Because everyone does take a photo of their food before they start to consume it. So it's highly influential, I think.
Fantastic. And of course, anyone that's interested in hearing more about social media in China, we're going to be addressing that. Denise is going to be presenting some learnings from a conference she attended. And that will be next Thursday's installment of this series. So far, that's all my questions from the chat channel. So I guess what I wanted to try now is if anybody has any questions that they would just like to open their mic and pose to the panel, now would be the time to do it. Please feel free to speak up now. Okay, we're all too nervous to do that, and I'm glad a little bit because I didn't really want 50 people all speaking at the same time. But please, I'm just going to finish off a few little things here. Can you put me slides back on, please? And next one. Sorry. Bear with us, callers. Thank you very much. Okay. I just wanted to direct you, because the metabolic health research out in China was done 2017. So there is a full and comprehensive report available if you do want the full details of what we did, what we learned. Obviously, this was a top line delivery of findings today. So if you go to the High Value Nutrition website, you can go then to the knowledge section, where if you don't already have a login, you can ask for a password at that point and you'll get one sent out to you within a day or two. And once you're in there, there's a treasure trove of reports. I can speak specifically about the consumer insights work, so there's lots of reports in there of all the work that we've done, and of course the metabolic health report is in there. So please do go along and have a look in there. And then lastly, really just finishing up, because I wanted to say that I will send out a quick survey at the end of the whole series, so at the end of next week, just to find out how you all found this experience of being online, because it is a new one for us, and obviously one day we will be running our face-to-face workshops again, but just to understand how this has worked for people is perhaps as complementary to the face-to-face workshops, or how we want to use them. And then to remind you that next Tuesday we'll be running our next episode in this series, which will be Tuesday the 18th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon again. We're going to have Dr. Ivy Gan presenting again in the series, and this time it'll be about Chinese doctors' attitudes to diet and health. And that's a really interesting piece of work we've done, where we've talked to doctors who have got a background in both TCM and Western practices. So hearing about how their beliefs and attitudes measure up against what consumers are actually telling us out in China. So please join us for that. It's been great to see you all again today. And I will email out links to the recorded material once we've finished the entire series. So watch out in your inboxes for that. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.